The Old School is brought to you by Ahart Solutions, which provides school surveys and applied research. More information at ahartsolutions.com. Good morning and welcome to The Old School, a podcast hosted by two guys who are at the end of their ropes. And the other guy who's at the end of his rope is my good friend, Dr. Stephen Bourgeois. Good morning, Dr. Bourgeois.
Hey Miller, it's so great to see you, and you're in such a whimsical mood. I'm trying to think through the end of the rope metaphor image. Would you flesh that out a little bit so I know what end I'm at? Where am I? What's happening here with this metaphor?
Well, I mean, some people would say that the end of the rope is befitting of characteristics to suggest someone who's really not able to do it anymore.
Okay. I was thinking of like the hanging metaphor or something. But
Well, you can talk about that too. That not suggesting that our demise is imminent, but
some argument that the demise is coming. It's kind of my
nigh upon us.
yeah. It's been my worldview for a long time. Just every day looking around over the shoulder. But the end of the rope, I like it. I'm going to embrace that. Here, Miller, why are you at the end of your rope? What brought that on?
No, this past week I did two things that I typically would never do. And in both cases, I did it for people that I care about greatly. The first was I went to the State Fair of Texas.
You went in person. You wandered
I didn't want any of it. Just,
oh,
but my daughter, as is typical with Texas students, they got a free ticket, and that of course was that was right before a week-long fall break, and she was very excited to go, and so to me, I felt like I would be. I mean, my family already knows that to a certain extent, I am an old curmudgeon. But it seemed even too much for me to deny my daughter the chance to go to the fair, ride these deadly rides that, in the words of Nate Bargatze, were on the interstate an hour ago, and she went flinging through the air. So, and so we went to that, and that included, as most fairs in Texas do, it includes not just rides, not just copious amounts of fried food, including things that you wouldn't think should or could be fried, but also there were animals, there was petting areas, there was baby goats and things of that nature. My daughter is crazy about animals, and so she got to pet a kangaroo who had to be thinking to themselves, why are they there? Much like I was thinking to myself why I was there. But so but so we did that, and it was fine, whatever, but and then the second thing I did that I only did because I really care for the other people involved was I went to the 1-year-old birthday of a set of twins.
just quiet.
But it's just what do you
Was this
there's
on the
nothing
way
else to say
home
about
from the fair where you were still, suffering from the shock repercussions of the crowds? I mean, everything that we both don't like in this world was right there in front of you.
it. I can't say anything because I invited my friends to my daughter's 1-year-old birthday party, and I know they only came because they felt obligated to me. It's not that they cared about the kid. They may have cared about it in a kind of, tangential sort of way, but I mean,
Your place is different though. You have alcohol and you have really, really good food.
well, it wasn't bad food. They had good food. They had some good cake, and so there were certainly reasons to enjoy aspects of it. But everyone just kind of sitting around and watching two 1-year-olds do their thing is not. I mean, what are you going to do? Oh.
That's what parenting is. You get to learn how to parent them.
We're talking about parenting, about just kind of the joys and trials and tribulations of parenting, and that's come up in recent days. And so, yeah, it's been a very busy week, but on the whole, not horrible, but certainly punctuated by a couple of things that I normally would not be caught dead at um, on the calendar.
So, if you were on your own, you wouldn't say, "Hey, I mean, remember when we were teachers? That wasn't that long ago. Well, decade, more than a
Not
decade.
long ago for me, but
Yeah, but they gave those tickets away to kids, but also to teachers, and that because you got your tickets, to the state fair, and I never used mine. I don't know. They probably went right in the trash or in my top drawer because I just would put basically the top drawer was also trash, the receptacle. Uh, but I never took them up on it. I mean, I didn't like fairs when I was a kid. You know, combined everything. I didn't like rides. I certainly didn't like crowds. Try to avoid animals. Uh, so everything about it just wanted it to go away. And the old fairs, there was a little charm about them because the rides were kind of quaint and you were supposed to go, but I just deep down knew that I really don't belong here.
well, the State Fair of Texas does have its fame, and it centers on not just the Cotton Bowl, because the game between Texas and Oklahoma typically happens
Yeah.
during the days of the State Fair of Texas, and of course, the Cotton Bowl kind of sits right in the middle of where the fair takes place. But also the fried food. I think the corn dog actually came out of the State Fair of Texas.
They invented it
Yeah.
just just like they invented funnel cake. Apparently, I keep hearing people talking. I don't even know what funnel cake is, but people fry that too.
Well, it's just batter. They just kind of swirl it around in the oil and create like this large circle of some sort of Gordian knot of batter and fry it, and then you eat it with some powdered sugar on top.
That's so strange. Do they have fried bacon? Because I would eat that.
I'll tell you what, some of the stuff they had, it doesn't make sense. Fried Reese's Pieces,
Okay.
fried pho.
Pho? Excuse me?
Yeah, I don't know how the hell you do that. I mean, how do you fry a broth in soup? But somehow they
Congeal
do it.
and then you eat the soup with both hands.
I don't know.
That's stupid.
Yeah, it is stupid. Fried cheesecake,
Okay. It's
fried butter.
fried butter.
Yeah,
So people are actually eating butter, but it's not enough that butter's bad for you by itself. They're kind of doubling down on the cholesterol. I love it.
but anyway, so yeah, there's people out there that are just one tick away from a full coronary, and they're just out there eating one batter of fried food after another. So yeah, that was my Tuesday
Okay.
this past week. So
Well,
there you go.
so what are we going to do now here, Miller? We talked about doing an episode on depression. I think it comes out of what you just did. I just took a trip, and I don't like to travel. I don't like to be on airplanes or airports and and just around any humans. As I'm copying Larry David, who says, "I really don't like humans or people." I think he said hate, but I'm forced to live amongst them. And
You're
you're
an agoraphobic.
what's that?
You're an agoraphobe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like a few people now and again, but not a
Have you?
not to be sitting 3 or 4 inches sharing a seat practically with a complete stranger, and then maybe another on your other side. I mean, who would want to be confronted with that? Um, for
You're
any,
saying you didn't take this opportunity to get to know them on a deep personal level?
so I always sit by the in the aisle because just like you, I have to get up. Um, and but immediately before everybody's even settled into their seats, I turn on the reading light and I have my book out, and it's really a defensive tool. So I'm reading, and they started to talk to each other, which was great. But they were pretty animated and talked most of the trip. Then they got quiet later on. But I just read the whole time until it was established that I wasn't going to communicate. Then I just sat there in peace. But no, I don't ever want to talk to somebody that I've never met in a plane. It said sometimes they'll trick you into answering a question, and they'll pivot and they really are eager to talk. But I've never been that person, so I'll avoid it. I'll fake an injury, anything. Uh, Maybe I'll put on one of those COVID masks or something. Who knows? And anything just to not have that conversation because it's usually awkward and no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not playing.
Very interesting. I'm just thinking you're missing some great learning opportunities as you sit on that plane. And I would think, as a lifelong learner, such as yourself, one who is always interested in expanding the boundaries of your mind and your knowledge and your heart, I would think that you would take that opportunity to learn from your fellow man.
Well, I'm immediately in a grumpy mood, just the process of getting onto the plane. I mean, if I'm in a bar or something and there seems to be, you're separated by two stools and you have a libation and there's a bartender to kind of mediate, there's sports on. And so you're not committing to this complete conversation. It's like you're on a long boat ride with somebody. You'll say something and then 4 hours later, something else. It's natural, but it's not like, okay, now we're talking. It's more, it's much easier in that, but with a plane, you're trapped with them, and they may not be that interesting, or they could just be annoying. And so I'm not willing to risk it.
Hmm. Well, I think you would have had an opportunity to contemplate what you would like to talk about today.
Oh,
And indeed, you did give the kernel of an idea, and that is the idea of the end of teaching.
the end of teaching.
You see, it's the future of teaching.
I love that
Do you have any
because,
thought to that?
yeah, I mean, one of our shared favorite books is The End of Education by Neil Postman. And he
Yes.
end as in the purpose, but also the end as in the end. It's over. I think a lot of people predict the end of education and then it persists. And by education, he means, and I mean schooling. It
Right.
transforms, but it's one of the more conservative, meaning conserving. It doesn't change that quickly. And a lot of the functions of schooling are not even related to curriculum. It's just being in a room with young people and mentoring them and teaching them so that they can function in a group and not be animals there. So it's a civilizing context. And so that part's never going to change. But pivoting to the teacher, and in our book, we talked about how teachers are happily um, looking at using the computer and software applications, essentially having the seeds of their own demise, and gradually that will happen. Um, and I'm giving my whole prophecy at once, but it's maybe not like we think because those tools, it's really not used much. If you look at the whole thing, if you go into a third grade classroom, you've been to one of those. They look about like they did 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Same letters on the wall, the map with people reading. And then, yeah, they bring in a little technology. And that's kind of what it is in K-12 education. It's still not the thing, but it's in there. But there's about to be a thing that's going to change it. So I'll stop there and let you maybe comment, and then I can continue the prophecy.
Well, I think, yeah, people may think that we talk about technology and maybe we talk about it too much, or maybe we attribute too much of the sins of culture to it. But there is a reason for it, because technology, of course, is how we go from the teacher being at the center of the instruction to the teacher not being at the center of instruction. And it begins rather innocently enough. I was thinking about, how does the process of technology taking over happen? And it typically happens with, and I guess the first time it happened was like in the form of like distance learning. When you don't have a teacher that teaches a particular subject in a particular place, or if you're like in a remote place, God forbid, you're like in Alaska somewhere, and you need somebody to come in from outside to be the one to teach the students. Um, at that point, there no longer is that, and it is all necessary because the students have to know a particular subject. There's no one within the small community or the rural area to do it, and so you use the next best thing, which is a teacher far away, and that makes sense. And you can kind of live with that if it stops with that. But as time goes on, technology takes over more and more, and I mean all kinds of occupations and uh, fields of endeavor have kind of succumbed to technology. I mean, we had the recent strike with the longshoremen was partly about automation, and I don't know how, people arguing against automation. It feels a little bit like when
Hmm.
William Tecumseh Sherman during the Civil War received a letter from the City Council of Atlanta saying, please spare the city. And he said, you might as well go outside and argue with the storm than argue with the effects of war. So, the fight, the argument, and screaming and yelling about automation may be a lost argument. I don't know. But I think that, the more technology is present, the more technology it gives someone the idea that it could do the job in place of the individual teacher. And you see it. I mean, you go out and do your daily life, and you see it. You know, poor checkout counter folks. I mean, some of them have unions, but in a lot of states like Texas, there's no one to speak up for the fact that yeah, just let the customers do it. So you have the self checkout lines, and then pretty soon that will be all there is. That doesn't happen everywhere, but you start to see it. And so, as teachers, I think surrender more and more of the act of teaching through technology, the more and more, or the closer we get to a point where someone's going to have the bright idea. Why do we even need these troublesome folks here in the first place?
Well, something happened in COVID, and it's not a coincidence that that's when we had the great resignation and the great retirement of teachers. But it might be worth unpacking that a little bit because I don't think it was just the horrible experience, and I wasn't in that classroom at that point, and you were. But you know, it put teachers in a real difficult position for which they were not prepared, and they're dealing with the technology came in very quickly at that point, and they had to adjust, and they did, I think, a heroic job in that circumstance, not knowing what they were dealing with medically. But they did it, and they should. And people forget, that the teachers were afraid, and for some really good reasons, but they did it. They pushed through, and education continued. But there's something about realizing that, oh, we can do this from home. And I saw the other side of it with my kids, each in their three rooms, on the doing class distance learning, basically with a teacher. And you know, the teacher saw that, and so I think in the long run they thought, wait a minute, we're doing this, but say you're a history teacher, you're one teacher with these 30 kids or whatever you have, but the teachers are smart, and they realize that distance education could be a ratio of 300 or 3,000 students to one teacher. And so the role of the teacher as the disseminator of knowledge, um, they probably have had a little bit of insight and fear, thinking, okay, this has happened, and we're not on such stable footing, because that's why people teach. in a lot of ways because the school year is predictable. You have the seasons and but it's a solid profession. You're not going to get cut that often. It happens, of course. But suddenly the rug was pulled out and they're realizing, okay, I they see the writing on the wall a little bit more because they actually lived through it. And thinking, okay, maybe and plus it was just a horrible experience for the most part. And they also, I imagine, saw something in the students, the passivity maybe, and the students wanting to turn their screen off and play video games. There was this tension, and I'm sure people have written about it, but I'd like your take on it. But that's my theory that this, we're dealing with a lasting effect of that, number one.
I think there is a lasting effect with COVID, but I think it's double-sided. So
Mhm.
um, I was one of those folks that felt like we should have gone back to school in August of 2020. I know there's a lot of people around the country that did not do that, and I know there's a lot of people within our community that didn't want to do it. But if those poor schmucks at the grocery store have to be there, then certainly we can be there, and they have less on the line than we do. They're not getting paid like we're getting paid. They're not getting benefits the way we're getting benefits. And so if those folks can uh, push through, everybody needs to kind of do their part if they can. And I had one teacher that, he waited to the last day before he said, I'm not coming back. And it was a crappy thing to do. If he had said that, a month before, I would have said, hey, God bless you. Good luck to you. Hope everything works out. And we're going to find somebody else. But you know, I think we should have been there. We should have been on duty. And while yes, I do agree that it opened the floodgates, it also taught us that what we did not want. Because you're talking about your kiddos in their rooms. I had a kindergartner
Mhm.
trying to learn math or whatever they were learning in kindergarten on Zoom. Uh, she used to go to a dance studio. They were trying to do dances on Zoom. And I mean, God bless them. You do what you got to do. But I mean, it's a horrible way of doing stuff. And I think even the kids got it that this is not an optimal way to do this. But I think what it did do is it did refine what people wanted to do online. And while they did not necessarily want the teacher online, there, more stuff got streamlined into the process, whether we're talking about ancillary material, whether we're talking about, um, you know, computer programs with regards to gradebook and things of that nature. All these things uh, tie into, entering into the mix, and it slowly takes over aspects of the job. And so I would agree. Yes, I mean there definitely was a flood of technology, but as much as it took over, it also taught people maybe a cautionary tale that there's some things there's certain places we don't want to go to.
Well, I wonder if there's more technology. I mean, the infrastructure is there and it had to be amplified very quickly. I would wager that there are fewer photocopies today than there were in 2020. There's been it's become more natural to share things digitally with students. Different type of portals of communication, were set up since then to deliver more online type lessons. But for me, the bigger pivot is happening now, and it's happening every day and every week, and it may not be in the classroom yet. And I'm talking about generative AI and the potential to have. I mean, right now you're doing tutoring. It's Ross Miller one-on-one tutoring a student. I think every student would benefit from that, and it's the ideal ratio of student teacher and to get the most out of the time for sure. It's not scalable, right? But it
Right.
but it's but it's powerful in what can happen in that amount of time. And plus, there's a relationship and all these good things that we've talked about for years.
Mhm.
But the potential now with AI, I mean, AI is being overly humble, saying, "Oh, we're just a large language model." Yeah, just words that we're predicting. It's a predictive algorithm, and we're going to get the text out there. But it's you can also get images from it. You can get video from it. You can have a bot that looks and sounds a lot like Mr. Miller having a conversation where I'm imagining this bot asks a question and then assesses the student's knowledge and then does a follow-up question. It can have a full-on conversation, giving content, having images, slides, whatever, interactive. Um, that's at the infancy. I mean, it's just starting. It's a baby compared to what it's going to be. But the full automated classroom, I think first I have to say it's probably the worst development we've ever seen. We're not ready for what that's going to do. But that's going to compromise the teacher as disseminator of knowledge much more than what we just discussed about using some of these little tools and Zoom and so forth, where they were still teaching. They were still the holder of the knowledge. But the role, I'm not going to say this is the death of schools or teachers, but that role is going to look dramatically different, even if, in a few years than it has been. The change will, because it's actually not that expensive, to put that type of technology in a school. They're not wiring much; they're already set up for it. And so I think that over time that's going to change the number of teachers we need, what they do, the type of role that a teacher has. Ideally, leading more discussion and things that we think should be happening anyway. But everything is going to change and probably quicker than we can imagine.
Well, I think about the way AI had started towards the very end of my career, and it was being done well, typically technology is used in two ways by students, at least the last time I was in the classroom. One is to get factoids,
Mhm.
and second is for the work to be done for you. And so none of those precludes the continued need for the essentialness of teachers, because even if even if AI comes to a point where it can sit there and talk to you in the voice of Scarlett Johansson and tell you everything you wanted to know about history, from a voice that you're more inclined to listen to than Mr. Miller,
For sure.
yeah, you're still not going to use it, or at least kids have not shown the capacity to use it for more in depth thinking. And so, if anything, I think there's still going to be perhaps a chance that teachers might be able to find a place. Because, I mean, as far as the internet goes, I mean, kids can find whatever they want about the internet, but they horribly underutilize it. They'll sit there and look up what year was this such and such happened. You can find that in a book. And so, what kids are trained to ask technology will determine to what degree teachers are still useful. I think in a perfect world, well, in a perfect world it would be something entirely different. But I mean, I kind of like your idea of kids getting the facts, and then it's the teacher's job for them to use those facts in a kind of intellectual, comprehensive, complex sort of way. And maybe that becomes a much more focused profession, which will, by the way, require a hell of a lot more of the teacher to be able to pull off. Because there's certain teachers out there that all they do is just sit out there and spout facts, but they don't spout context.
Well, the student in a way doesn't have to drive the questioning. The bot can listen and then frame a higher level question and push them forward. I mean, I think a lot of teachers are asking knowledge-based questions and people are raising their hand. And if you look at student speech in class, they do one, two, or three words. So the the potential is there. That what would need to happen is a lot of instruction in reading and writing, because that's what I think is getting lost with a lot of this. I mean, students today high school kids, particularly when they're assigned a book, they're not going to hold that book or even a PDF, decode it by just reading it and learn it. They tend to listen to books. They put it on 1.5 speed, so it goes quicker. So they're using their ears. It's really going back to a pre-writing stage, in some way. Back to the
Go back to the oral tradition.
absolutely. So these decoding skills, it's kind of like you use it or lose it. Students get a headache when they have to physically read something that you don't hear it played back. But I think, the bigger issue is writing. And I want to say a few things about AI and writing. And it's not what we thought. It's not like a high school kid that's going to need to write an essay on Moby Dick or something like that, Tale of Two Cities, and put in the prompt from the teacher, and then in 3 seconds, here's your essay. Here you go, teacher. That's not, and that's what people were afraid of. But students are using it for research to get all these sources to get material, but they're also using it as an editor. And so they'll type kind of sloppy text, just whatever comes to mind, and then they put it in the bot and say, clean this up.
Mm-hmm.
Then they take that and rework it so they're not caught. But it's a tool for sure. But the process of writing is different. The writing that we remembered, where we would write a sentence and we would struggle to find the next word. That struggle is gone. I mean, it's been gone for a long time. There's something about the nature of typing. You're not really thinking as much as when we would cross out a word and so forth. It was like a palimpsest, something on top of something else. But the scratched out words were still there. And that's when you scratch out a word, by definition, you're thinking, you're processing, coming up with the next word, you're restructuring text. All of this can happen, for them. So I think that these real, what we would call basic skills are becoming exotic, and reading will be one, math, we don't even need to get into that because students, if it's about getting the answer, and I don't
Right.
think it is anymore, it's about turning language into math language. And so I think that might be okay for a while. But the type of reading, deep reading and writing and thinking will be the task of the teacher to ensure that's not lost.
I think it's up to teachers. I also think it's up to leaders in this country to be statesmen and stateswomen and statespeople, whatever you want to call them. But the idea of leading the charge by asking the right kind of questions. One of the things that I have bemoaned is the lack of cursive education, because without people knowing how to write and ergo read um, cursive, they 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 no longer have the capacity to read original documentation. They can't read their grandmother's writings. They cannot read the Declaration of Independence. And more, it's left to some sort of middleman
Mhm.
or middle something to print it out in such a way that they would be able to read it. And as Postman said, when something is gained, something is lost. And that loss is potentially catastrophic as far as like how we relate to history, how we relate to our own history, family history, national history, whatever, you know. And so anytime there is a technology that purports to be able to do something easier so that the student can therefore concentrate on something else, I would suggest that the way most people do things, not even talking about students, but the way most people do things is to find the quickest way from point A to point B.
Mhm.
So not only will the students lose the ability to do what the computer has taken over, but they will never get to the point where they will try to engage in what the computer was not supposed to do for them. And so, um, you know, I think coming from us, we are called the old school.
Yeah. So,
I think it's very easy to dismiss us as just two old people that don't understand technology and don't understand, uh, the benefits of it. But I would suggest to you, as you know, to paraphrase a great man, there's more underneath the stars than, someone's philosophies about technology. There's more here than meets the eye. And I think for younger people or for younger professionals, I think that they are too in it to see it. And I think you need to be outside of it or have been outside of it to have a better understanding of potential cause and effect. And I think that's where we are now.
I think they need us on that wall. Yeah. That's what we're doing. And but writing, physically writing, even printing, I think that writing in cursive is a little exotic in the educational system, meaning you get it in classical schools, and I'm advocating for it as well. But at a certain point, students are typing, or to the point where their writing will look like serial killer writing, really bad. And so students are writing, I mean, really, they're going back to the caveman times, where they're writing with their two thumbs. They're using the opposable thumb to text, and that if you really imagine getting rid of the phone, not like we said last week, but removing it, but the thumbs are still moving and they're looking down hunched over. That's not a real intelligent human image, right? And they're looking pretty old school. They're typing with their thumbs and so forth. Now I may have mentioned that I just use one finger, my index finger of my right hand. I refuse to type with my thumbs, and I'm really slow, and that's why I hate texting because it's really slow and I make mistakes on about every three letters. Um, but that's how students are writing. So there's your penmanship. It's two opposable thumbs, typing on a little dinky screen. Tablet, right? A tablet.
Gandhi said that poor handwriting was a sign of an incomplete education.
Hmm?
There are things that are learned by writing. And it's one of the reasons why I would never let students take notes on a computer or a tablet, although students always ask me to.
Yeah.
And I said, no, you write it. Because I think that the mental process of hearing something, processing it, reorganizing it, and then writing it down, it is a process of learning. And it is the beginning process of learning, but it is a process of learning. And so I don't know if there's enough voices saying that message, and I certainly know that there's not enough ears to hear the message. But this is what we're talking about, and you take it all the way back to um, uh, Faust, the idea that when you take something, you give up something. And you can find plenty of examples in history where what you gave up was worth giving up. But what happens when it comes to giving up things that are actually better for you as a person, as an individual, as a species? What happens next? And pretty soon it's like that cartoon Wally, where the people are just a bunch of fat blobs in chairs, just getting amused to death and not capable of any kind of initiative. And you look at Wally as a movie, and you say to yourself, "Well, that's just a movie," but it's not just a movie, And there is a message there that needs to be taken perhaps a little bit more seriously.
So if you ever try, and you probably will be doing this, you've done it, but teach a college course with undergraduates and tell them to write by hand and get rid of their laptop. I mean, they would not only complain, but they would try to get you fired immediately before the next class starts, Um, but which kind of brings up the idea of what, we talk about this, but there's a wave, and it's not regulated, and it's, it's out of the box, the bottle, whatever you want to call it. Um, so what's going to happen? I mean, you look around, so many, I mean, a lot of people are writing and talking about it, will AI take jobs? Well, it's doing it.
Mm.
I mean, even in my work, I don't really have a research assistant because the types of tasks that they were doing, I can do in seconds now. And that's, but really anybody who's, working in a cubicle, no offense, but you should be looking over your shoulder because those are often repeatable tasks, and you're not in front of people presenting a lot. You're working through data and text and so forth. Those are things that can be automated, and so it's going to be bigger than we think. And I think from all of our conversations, we've said that teaching is a whole lot more than just giving data and presenting to students and taking
Right.
notes and correcting. But it's those other things that really matter. And you know, but eventually we're going to need to train teachers differently, and to be aware, that things are changing, and we're training students for a workplace. If you ask any entrepreneur, CEO, they want people who can work, who can learn, because things change so quickly, but particularly people who can write and read and speak and handle themselves socially. All these things that are taught, in schools and taught very well.
Well, that could be our salvation. As much as this country seems to focus on and emphasize the needs of industry, you would think that that could be the saving grace if industry leaders continue to harp on the idea that there has to be extensive training on speaking, thinking, solving problems, writing, things of that nature. That could be what saves, the baby in the bathwater kind of a thing, that's threatened to get tossed out. So, you know, it's you think about the mood of our conversation today, and you wonder why. Well, maybe the episode should have been about depression because there's a lot to be discouraged about. But I still can't help but think, and it's because I'm an optimist, but maybe there's some reason to think that all is not lost. That there are advantages. Um, there are enough signs of people understanding that this cannot be sent out into the world unfettered, that there has to be some sort of way that you regulate the way you use it, how you use it, what have you. That at least within the school building will be tempered somewhat, if not at the house.
Well, schools are very inefficient, very slow to change, and so that's a blessing, right? So this is going to maybe it's not going to grow as quickly there as it will in business, where they will remove employees because it's an efficiency. They'll go out of business if they're not
Mm.
more efficient. But in the schools, there may come a time. Imagine there's a physical robot in the room in front of that classroom. Hello, class. Start to the, there's a time when you take the last train to the coast, right? And maybe that for me would be that moment. Okay, that's it.
Right. Well, I know whatever happens, the effects of it will not be on me because I will be food for worms by that.
That's the
That
Lost Miller I like. My goodness. Uh, yeah,
that's God bless us.
you're
So
you're a master of despair.
no, it's not even despair. I mean, it's like it's very strange. I get worked up about education because I spent so much of my life in it. So therefore I take things like that a little bit more personally. But as far as a lot of things go, the more I see people getting worked up about something, the more I think, you know what, in 30 years you're gonna be dead. It doesn't matter, settle down, what the hell are you getting so worked up about? And so, there's a part of me that, I have to kind of fight that feeling a lot of times,
Yeah,
So,
it
but
it, it bothers me here, Miller. I get worked up. Um, I was just listening to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, the great gig in the sky, where you have that
yeah,
incredible vocalist who has no words but is raging.
screaming.
Yeah, but if you listen carefully, that rage, hits a peak, kind of like a child crying. Actually, they have like three crescendos, and but at the end, it kind of there's a little bit of acceptance after all the raging. And it continues. But I feel a lot like that. That's every time I listen to that, it's not just about mortality. It's about other things too. The lack of control. Eventually, we put our hands up, and that
Mhm.
yeah. But I'm still raging. Um, that's why I think we're doing this podcast in a way. We're raging.
We have seen the enemy, and it is us.
Yes. Thank you, Herr Miller.
All right. Well, after that treatise of depression, string of lamentations,
Yes.
kind of a tangential follow up to the grievances uh, episodes. Yeah, people are going to be out. With one more depressing episode, they're like, I can't do it anymore. I just can't listen
Yeah.
anymore.
Delete. They could block us or something. Get
Just
rid of
unfollow
Spotify.
us.
That's right. Unfollow, get rid of Spotify, do anything but that.
Well, hopefully you'll stick around because we do have some guests coming up in the not so distant future. We also have our 100th episode, which is coming up in a couple weeks, so that's a big deal. Who knows what we're going to do for that? But um, certainly good things ahead and good conversations ahead, and that's what the whole thing is about. It's a cheap excuse to be able to talk to smart people, if nothing else, one another. But it's certainly better when we have other people on with us, and so hopefully we're able to do that. But good conversations is the key. But with that, it's football time in America. So it's also baseball time. The World Series is nigh upon us. It could be a replay of the 78 World Series, Yankees Dodgers?
I had forgotten about the sport until you just brought it up, but I'm sure
That's ridiculous. It's a national pastime, for God's sakes.
it's
What's wrong with you?
we're almost in November and you can't be playing baseball in November.
We're doing it. We're doing it. I don't know what you're going to do, but we're doing it. So anyway, well, everybody listening, you go out and find your own pleasures,
Yes.
and we'll see you back here next week. And at this point, I shall say adieu, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Wiedersehen, Herr Miller.